I'm hoping you can hear me and see me okay. If there's any kind of technical issues hearing or seeing me or the screen anytime during this webinar, please just type it into the chat, and you can see my colleague Odessa here, who's going to be also helping support us in tracking your questions, as well as trying to troubleshoot some technical issues if there's any. Okay. So with that said, while we're waiting for another few moments for folks to arrive, I will do a little introduction of myself later on. You can see on the participants' names there. My name is Donna. I'm with Hub Cycling. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. First and foremost, we appreciate the time that you are taking to join us today. Please do take care of yourself and your bodies throughout this webinar, meaning if having your video off is something that will really help you to engage with the materials, feel free to just keep it off. If at any point during the webinar you want to turn it on and chime in, either ask a question or maybe provide some feedback or maybe ideas on your end, please also feel free to do so. At any point in time throughout the webinar, if you have questions, as I mentioned earlier, you can type it into the chat. I'm hoping that everybody's familiar with the chat function. It's at the very bottom of your screen. And my colleague Odessa here, as mentioned before, will help us track questions. And we're gonna pause a couple times during the webinar to help answer your questions. Again, if you prefer to ask them in voice, that's something that you'll also have the option to do when we're doing those Q&A sessions or segments during the webinar. Otherwise, we apologize. As you all know, webinars, anything online, remote learning poses challenges, of course. This webinar, because of the time limitation and the amount of materials we want to cover, is probably less interactive than we otherwise would like for it to be. So just a heads up there for all of us. That said, does not mean that this is not a collaborative peer sharing learning space either. So again, like I said, if there's any thoughts or ideas or suggestions, right, things that you've done or tried that really worked well for you, please do feel free to share them in the chat throughout our time together. Okay, just to honor everybody's time, I wanted to get started. Okay, and again, welcome to those of you who are just arriving, settling in, and I'm just going to share my screen here. All right, so hope you found yourself in the right workshop here. We are talking all about planning your next bike rides and route planning today, okay? Hoping this is more of a conversation rather than us talking at you, but we certainly will be sharing some considerations or ideas with you that will hopefully help support you to become more confident, comfortable planning your next bike rides. Before we get started, wanting to take a moment and direct our collective attention to the fact that we can't talk about cycling, whether or not this is bike safety, facilities, without considering the land and territories on which this is all taking place. Hub Cycling, through many of our projects, are operating on the traditional, ancestral, and stolen lands and territories of many First Nations peoples and communities. And today, specifically, I am signing in and joining you all in this learning and sharing space from the traditional, ancestral, and stolen territories and lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And we're hoping that this acknowledgement, for the lack of a better word, is also an invitation for all of us to continue to take moments out of our day to both reflect and act in ways that will support our Indigenous communities and peoples that came before us, that are around us today in the communities and lands and territories that we're on. With the unmarked graves being discovered throughout this last year, with the numbers going up, I hope that this is certainly a reminder to all of us to think about how colonial violence, harm is not historical. It is ongoing and is very much present in our day-to-day still right now. So in terms of ways in which the actions that we can take, whether or not this is researching and finding out more about the Indigenous peoples and communities that came before us, right? Where you're located, whether or not this is really learning how to pronounce the names of the peoples and the lands properly. Or this is donating time, money to support, redistribute that wealth to Indigenous businesses, artists, movements, specifically in your communities and in the so-called Canada. These are all some things that we hope that you're thinking about and that you continue to consider and have conversations about with the people around you as well. So with that said, I hope that many of you are familiar with hub cycling. We're probably most well known through some of our celebratory or celebration events like Bike to Work and Bike to School Week. We just had Bike to Shop days this past, I believe, week, or maybe this the week before. And Bike Night is coming up, I believe, in September, October. May look slightly differently because of this special circumstance with COVID, but they're coming and they're continuing. A couple of other pillars of our work is education and advocacy. I'm not going to speak too much on these. Education, we do workshops like this one, webinars, as well as community-based workshops. And we go into schools and educate thousands of school-age children from grade 4 to all the way to now actually into high school, even grade 8 and 9 we've taught this last season. Advocacy, there are over, I believe, 10, now probably 12 local committees working with their municipalities and the province to make cycling better. This means that they're really giving the municipalities, the governments, the municipal governments in the province feedback and certainly research that's done collaboratively to inform better infrastructure, better planning, to take into consideration all road users, and that includes folks that are on bikes. For more information, you can always log on to our website, bikehub.ca, and you'll find a lot more information there, including upcoming events. Okay. Quick little intro about myself. My name is Donna. My ancestral name is Chen Tang Tang. I go by she, her pronouns. I've been with hub cycling for many years, since 2012 in different capacities. One of my most, I would say, rewarding roles is being on the ground and actually delivering, facilitating these educational spaces and being able to witness also the joy and the confidence that's, sort of the impact of our work as well. So here is a little overview of what we are hoping to cover today. Okay, we're gonna, before our first pause for a short Q&A, we're gonna talk a little bit about considerations for route planning and some characteristics as they pertain to safety. And the second half of our webinar, we're going to share some of our favorite leisurely riding routes and talk a little bit about considerations between urban versus rural riding. Okay, there's different considerations there. And we're going to hopefully have a little conversation around some route planning tools. We'll share apps and sites and maps that we've found useful. And this is a place where perhaps for some of you who are doing route planning, maybe, whether or not it's regularly or have done so with family and friends, any tips that you want to share, that's something that we can certainly facilitate as well. Last but not least, we're going to talk a little bit about multimodal trip planning, taking our bikes on different public transportation platforms, right? And ways in which you can combine them, okay? And we're hoping to have a bit of time at the end for some more Q&A from you. Okay, so to get us started, it's for some of you, it may be just around lunchtime. For some of you, maybe it's in the afternoon. I don't know, just to get our brains working a little bit. Okay. So I know this is going to be a really hard thing to narrow down. Okay. So what we're really wanting to get a sense of is for all of us who are in the room, what are, especially this last maybe year and a half, I know it's been a bit unique in terms of the times, right, during COVID, and there's lots of different restrictions at different times. What can you, just taking a moment and inviting you to look through this list, what are the top 5 reasons you're going out for bike rides these days? Okay, so we can take a look, and I'll just pause here for a moment to allow you to fill this in. And while you do that, I'll have a little conversation with my colleague Odessa here. Any thoughts, Odessa? What's the top couple reasons now you go for rides?
Yeah, well, for me, I stopped having to commute for work for about a year, like a lot of people. And so I found myself going on a lot more rides that were just driven by a desire to go for a ride, and I could go different places. I didn't have to take the same route. So it was a nice change. I didn't have to go up the hill to UBC if I didn't want to. And yeah, I've seen a lot of people in my family and friend group start riding who maybe didn't before. People who no longer wanted to take transit for, safety reasons and concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely noticed a shift in my sort of reasons for riding as well. A lot of times simply is just to get out and clear my head. And I recognize that even for the times that I prefer to ride, I often love riding in the evenings or, later on in the day, just because the streets are sometimes quieter around them too. Let's see what folks are saying about their reasons. Oh, wow. Great. That's nice to see that folks are really using their bikes to go run errands and to shop. Yeah, the essentials. Definitely, I see a few other contenders here. Okay, so still really need, especially probably for folks who are either going to school or maybe have younger, children who are needing to go to school. Yeah, that's still something you need to use your bike for. Yeah, this discovering new places and sightseeing, good one. I've definitely seen an increase, especially on some of the more scenic routes in places that I frequent. That seems to be a really good way, definitely a safer, mode of transportation for many. Absolutely. Well, good to know. So this being said, it looks like this to run errands and to shop is a pretty, it's a shared top reason here. And also I'll just pick one more, maybe to discover new places and sightseeing. We're going to map these two, okay, into our next little poll. And let's see if I can find it here. Okay. So, and this is really just a little exercise to get us all to think about when we're doing, for different types of purpose of riding, we consider different things when we plan routes, right? So we're going to map that first top reason to run errands, to shop, right? For whether or not it's groceries or other things. Okay, what are the 3 top route planning considerations for running errands and shopping? So again, just going to give you a few moments to read through these options here and pick the top 3. I know it's hard to narrow it down to 3, but see which 3 feels the most important or relevant for you. Okay, I see folks are putting in their responses pretty quickly. Nice. Okay. I'll hold on for another few seconds if you want to participate here. Okay, just because of time, I'm going to end poll and share our results here. Okay, so wow, almost 100% of the folks are looking at safety being one of the biggest considerations here for shopping, running errands, absolutely. And trailing behind that, I love it, that certainly distance, I'm assuming that you may want to get the shortest route, depending on how much you're lugging on your bike possible. Hills, or perhaps even the lack of hills, I'm guessing, may be a consideration for people for running errands and shopping. And energy level, yeah, absolutely. So you can see here for different people, there may be very different considerations, right? So taking that into, you know, again, this idea of, you know, route planning, this is very perhaps unique and subjective for each person. With that said, let's do one last little exercise, okay? So this time I'm going to relaunch this poll and we're going to map the sightseeing. Okay, so sightseeing and discovering new places as the reason for your ride. Okay, and now if it is about sightseeing and trying to discover new places, what are some considerations here that are the top considerations for you? Is it different, similar? You can check, you know, the top 3 considerations that applies. Is it different or similar to the one when we're doing, when we were, what was the last reason again? Odessa, remind me, my brain is a bit of a bird brain here.
Sorry, the last reason on the
last reason that we mapped this on, I'm gonna see.
Oh, for shopping and errands.
Shopping and errands. Thank you. Yeah, see, this is what COVID does. Yes, absolutely. I'm forgetting what I said already. Great. So this is for sightseeing, discovering new places. Very nice. Seeing folks chiming in here. Okay, just because of time, I'll just end this poll for now and we're going to share this and see, let's see which comes up top for considerations. Nice. Yeah, so you can see weather now for many people. Yes, we do not want to be going out and discovering new places in possibly pouring rain, which we haven't had for really once, only a couple times maybe in the last 50 some days. Yes, definitely. And probably also we don't want it to be too hot, right? So that's a huge consideration there. Safety, still up there. Scenery, definitely. Yes. And yeah, I see folks also checking end of trip facilities. Yeah, that's an interesting one. And again, guessing that possibly this may be that you want to make sure that there's somewhere safe possibly, or maybe, you know, even en route, right? Facilities where you have water fountains or public washrooms available on this little leisurely ride. Yeah, absolutely. All of those things come in handy. Okay, so that said, our attempt to make this a little bit more interactive. I'm glad to see that you are all thinking about your specific needs, right? Ways in which that informs considerations for route planning for specific riding purposes. Now, the thing that we do notice that often is kind of at the top of people's considerations, doesn't matter what purpose they're riding for, is safety. So we thought that we'll spend a little bit of time just to share a little bit of research informed information with you so that you know you're more informed around safety considerations when you are doing route planning. Okay, and the research specifically that we're drawing from is a research that's called Cycling in Cities, and this was done in 2012, and at the time it was quite a I would say pioneer research study in the field, because up until then 90% of the research around cycling safety was done on helmets and only 10% were done on cycling facilities. And so this is an important body of research that really contributed to thinking about infrastructure, right, and routes when it's related as it pertains to cycling safety. And that's a very important consideration, if not more important than helmets. So with this said, this research just very quickly combines a couple of different types of studies. It combines opinion surveys, 1,400 opinion surveys across Metro Vancouver, and 690 injury studies. And this includes cyclists that were injured in both the Toronto and Vancouver area being treated at a hospital emergency. Again, this is part of a research study and opinion survey that's done. Again, there's a little bit of the sample size is urban specific. So know that, of course, there are always limitations to research and its findings. Okay. So what we wanted to share with you are some of the results that came out of this study around route characteristics and safety. So you can see here, if this image feels a little overwhelming, don't fret. I will take you through each row by row. Okay. So first of all, just see that there, according to this research, there are safer route types and there's less safe route types. And it goes from less safe to more safe, from the red to the green zone. You can see that up top. Okay. And for each row, these are different kinds of streets that are specific to. Some streets are with more traffic, others are less traffic or separated from traffic. So the first row, take a look at the first row. These are routes on or along major streets, from least dangerous to most dangerous, or rather from least safe to the most safe, rather, I should say. Okay, so take a look at that and see if there's any surprises for you. Just going to take a look at the time here. So of course, feel free to type into the chat if there's kind of any surprises or maybe anything that you feel, oh, this is an interesting theme that's popping up for me. Feel free to share with us and with one another in that way. I'll continue to talk, okay? So usually we find that people are very surprised about Sidewalk being one of the least safe routes or infrastructure along this line of infrastructures. And the reason is that there are, so number one is this perceived safety versus actual safety, right? And I know for many folks on bikes, there sometimes can be this misconceptualization around sidewalks. You know, they're only pedestrians, slower speed, somewhat separated from faster, right, bigger motor vehicle who may be traveling at a faster pace. So this perception of safety sometimes can get us into trouble. Right? So number one, sidewalk, often collisions can happen because when you're riding on a sidewalk, motor vehicles or cars are not expecting to see you when they're pulling out of, say, an alleyway or pulling into an alleyway, and they may not be even looking or anticipating such a fast traveling, right, road user on the sidewalk. So number one, expectation, that's really not kind of a straightforward expectation for motor vehicle drivers. Of course, another risk here is a collision with pedestrians, and we certainly, I think many of us can probably think of one or two that at least we've heard of, right? That is a pedestrian and cyclist collision on the sidewalk. Another, sadly, reason is that sidewalks sometimes can be fairly narrow. So depending on if you, especially if the front wheel of your bike hits something and you get knocked off of the sidewalk, there can be a risk of a collision with oncoming motor vehicles that may be traveling at a pretty fast speed. Okay, so again, just some considerations next time, making sure that you're aware of how perceived safety may not equal actual safety. Now, know that sidewalk riding folks are not going to give, especially young children, too hard of a time if they see them riding on the sidewalk. But this is one of the reasons why we're going to schools and educating younger kids on how to ride on the road, right? Knowing the rules of the road so that when they are older, when they get a bigger bike and when they're traveling faster, that they can do, share the road with other road users safely. With that said, know that sidewalk riding is also illegal in most municipalities in Metro Vancouver, except for two. I believe that parts of New West and parts of Maple Ridge, you can ride on the sidewalk, and I would recommend and encourage you to look at their bylaws, their specific sections on where you can ride on the sidewalk in both of those municipalities, but otherwise it is illegal, okay, especially for adults over the age of, I would say, 16. Otherwise, I hope you see the theme of usually for routes along or on major streets, streets without parked vehicles are safer. Okay, you can see that probably as a theme in the first row that you're looking at here. And that is because, unfortunately, 1 in 7 of the collisions research shows that it happens in the door zone. So again, the driver opening the door without looking. Of course, there are really easy ways to prevent that from happening, meaning that we want to leave, at least a meter of space between ourselves on a bike and a parked vehicle. Slowing down as you're approaching a parked vehicle also helps, right? So know that even though, yes, these are in research looking like they're less safe infrastructure, there are always ways that you can navigate that will make your ride much safer. The second row here, routes on residential streets. So we see that there is, I'll just talk a little bit around bike route with traffic circles and speed bumps. So as you all know, that for many folks who live in residential neighborhoods, traffic circles and speed bumps are meant to actually facilitate slowing down, facilitate traffic calming, right? This is meant for that. Unfortunately, in reality, it doesn't always happen like that. So for yourself, when you're navigating this with either just by yourself or with other people, remembering to slow down in anticipation of oncoming traffic, because again, knowing that maybe some of them may not abide by the rules of the road, meaning, they may not keep to the right to turn left. You may not have seen which way they're going, and all of a sudden they make a last minute decision to go somewhere else, right? So all of those things, again, just a reminder for you to make sure you're slowing down, abiding by the rules of the road, and knowing that that is also certainly a responsibility, right? When you are on the road with other road users. The last row here, again, I ask about surprises, right? So take a look at this last row. We've got bike-only paths, right, being the safest, right, especially in this category of routes separated from traffic. And you've got the multi-use path somehow less safe. thoughts? What do you think? Why do you think that paved multi-use path is less safe in this particular case than unpaved multi-use path? You can type that into the chat if you wish to participate a little. I'll pause here for a moment. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Nice. Yes. I'm sure if you have written multi-use paths, you know, whether or not it's the seawall or elsewhere, you've witnessed or experienced folks going really fast, right? And also know that on these multi-use paths, there are lots of road users who, you know, whether or not this is a skateboarder, a, you know, parent with a stroller, roller blades, roller skates, right? Dogs running around. So there's a lot happening as well. So yes, absolutely. So paved multi-use path, yes, the only reason why it is a slightly less safe than unpaved multi-use path is because folks tend to, it's more traction, of course, right? They tend to go faster, but know that multi-use path in general, again, this is a misconception that we perceive it to be pretty safe. In reality, it is actually less safe because of the plethora of different road users that are on it, and especially if they're not doing hand signals properly when they're stopping, right? There's a risk of collision there. So all of this is to say, here's our summary. Again, it's for those of you who don't like looking at these graphics and graphs, don't worry, I'm going to talk this out for you. So all we wanted to say here with this image is that based off of the opinion surveys and the injury studies, we essentially can see a correlation between route preference, people's preferred routes, and how safe it is. And for the most part, these two things line up. Okay, so you see major streets, actually less people prefer them, right? Because they're riding on the street with other motor vehicles, with parked cars, all those type of things, right? Less safe and less preferred. And with bike specific facilities, these are ones that are separated bike lanes, right? Quieter residential streets, bike only paths, things like that. People prefer it more. And it is also in research been found to be more safe. The one segment, right, of bike facilities that isn't quite lined up here is the multi-use paths, right? The multi-use paths rather is actually preferred by many, and yet they're less safe. So next time when you are on a multi-use path with your family, friends, loved ones, certainly feel free to share this information with them, and hopefully this only means that you're going to pay more attention. And part of this is that perceived safety means that people are not paying as much attention, right, to what's happening around them. So paying more attention, slowing down on multi-use path, using proper communication with other road users will all decrease the likelihood of something happening that is not safe. Okay. So with that said, we'll just introduce a quick little concept called Aaa Infrastructure. Okay, Aaa stands for all ages and abilities. And not surprisingly, you can see that the types of bike paths that are suitable for Aaa facilities are things like quieter local bikeways, quieter local street bikeways, protected bike lanes, right? As well as off-street pathways. And for the routes that are kind of sharing major streets, or even painted bike lanes and painted buffered bike lanes, are less suitable for all ages and abilities. So this may mean that next time, especially if you're planning a ride for younger folks in the family or somebody who is new to cycling, that you may want to look at the map specifically trying to connect those Aaa facilities when you're planning a route with them or for them. So a few examples of all ages and abilities. Okay, just some images here. This first slide here is of off-street pathways. So a couple examples here, the Spirit Trail, for those of you who are close to West Vancouver, right? Really nicely also, there are lots of good signage now on the Spirit Trail, so connecting the entire North Shore, really. On the right here is in Surrey, and this actually, the Fraser Heights Greenway here reminds me very much of the Arbutus Greenway that is in Vancouver, right? So you can see how infrastructure are starting to align in terms of their design and look of things, right? And really regulated in such a way that people will recognize how to use it as well, even across municipalities. The next one is all ages ability for on-street separated bikeways. So hopefully these two streets are familiar to most of you, right? This is in downtown Vancouver. On the left is Dunsmuir Street, on the right is Hornby Street. Those two also separated lanes connect with one another, right, as well. So looking at, so bidirectional, meaning that it's also separated nicely with these planters, greeneries, with motor vehicle traffic. This is preferred by most people. And in fact, research has shown that for cities that, you know, where there's a high percentage of people who are riding bikes, there are more separated infrastructures in that city. Next one is neighborhood bikeways. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. There are some neighborhood bikeways that are perhaps more safe than others, right? Specifically for this image on the right here, you can see how wide this neighborhood street bikeway is, meaning that you can, cyclists can stay comfortably a meter away from parked vehicles and be able to have space also to pass, right, one another. On the left here, it's, I'm pretty sure this is 10th in Vancouver, 10th Bikeway in Vancouver. Slightly too narrow perhaps in this case, meaning you as a cyclist definitely want to make sure that you're doing single file riding and really paying attention to when it is safe to pass. In this case, you know, even thinking about kind of taking the lane, right? And to stay away from those car doors. The last type of Aaa infrastructure we want to talk about is the protected intersections. So specifically, I know this is a little Vancouver centric, but there are a few in Vancouver that are kind of the gold standard for all ages and ability bike infrastructure. This is an image of one of them. It is on the south end of Burrard and Cornwall, just off of the Burrard side bridge or Burrard Street Bridge. Now on the north end, it looks pretty much similar, exactly the same as this. There's also a protected intersection at Quebec and First. That's newer for those of you who have either biked by or have used it in the past. Just a couple things for you to know specifically around protected intersections. The reason why they are the gold standard is because they increase safety because of 4 reasons, okay, or by 4 different factors. Number one is that it is operated by temporal separation, meaning that the timing for cyclists and pedestrians to cross is different from the timing for motor vehicles to go. So that creates a bit of a buffer, right, in terms of timing. The second reason or factor for safety is that for all of these protected intersections now, there are really safe places to wait for cyclists and pedestrians before that green light comes on, right? So safe spaces, yes, for some of these protected intersections, the safe spaces to wait is still pretty small, right? So if it's a busy time of the day, I know that it can be still a challenge, but notice those safe spaces that you now can tuck yourself in to wait. The third factor is around visibility. So as you can see, these protected intersections are painted, you know, I mean, there's the green paint that highlights, right, where bikes are supposed to go. The white lines are pretty pronounced as well. And there is a sidewalk, meaning you can see on the right side of this image, there is straight, solid white lines for pedestrians, and then these dotted white lines on the outside of the green paint. This is called elephant's feet or cross bike. And that when you see that, it means that as a cyclist, you don't have to get off the bike to get across the intersection, you can ride across. But oftentimes both pedestrians and cyclists don't really know what the straight line versus dotted line means. So they're walking and cycling each other's zones, right? So just know that that's what it means. The last factor is around speed. Okay, so it's around seeing how these protected intersections has really wide turning radius for cars, right? And stop bars for vehicles, motor vehicles. So the idea behind this is that when they turn, they have to slow down a bit, and that also can make sure to give cyclists and pedestrians a bit of a buffer to keep safe. Okay, lots of technical stuff, but we hope that this is helpful for you next time you're navigating something like this, also to share this with family and friends too. So lots of best practices in terms of how to plan, create, right, bike infrastructures or connecting gaps. And just a quick little note that Hub since 2017 has been championing this campaign called Ungap the Map. And you can find a lot more information on our website. The idea behind this is really to try to connect the gaps in between municipalities in the region, because often when folks are riding to, say, from home to work, from Coquitlam to Vancouver, there are lots of sections that don't connect. I know that is still an ongoing project, of course, but the good news is that, wonder where it went, but there is a new regional map that, oh, I found it. There is a new Metro Vancouver regional map that just came out in January of this year. This is downloadable from TransLink, or you can pick one up from either local bike shop, or maybe City Hall would have these as well. And it's a big map, since I think the last one was in 2012. So this is an updated version of it that factored in a lot of the infrastructure best practices and new routes that ungapped our regional map. Okay, lots of me talking. I'm very aware of the time here. We're going a little over time, so I'm going to actually, if it's okay with all of you, just type in your questions to the chat, and Odessa, if it's okay, just to either respond back to folks directly if you know the answer to them, or I will stop at the very end to take questions. Okay, sorry about that we're running a little over time. So inviting you to type it into the chat as I move on. Riding in rural areas, just a quick, I'm not going to read the things on the right, the bullet points, just a couple things to highlight here. Number one is really make sure that you have lights. Okay, so jackets, bright color clothing, reflectors may not do in especially darker rural areas that may not have lights or have very low lighting, because it requires that a light shines on you for, right, whether or not it's a high beam or not, shines on you before the driver sees you. So you don't want that to happen. Making sure you have lights, and maybe even some emergency lights with you. That's going to be really helpful for visibility. Second off, take those earbuds out of your ears. I know that it's really fun to be, especially touring. I love touring myself in rural areas. Electric vehicles and other vehicles sometimes can be really quiet when they sneak up on you. So really keeping those ears open will help prevent a lot of collision. Okay, so sharing a few of our favorite leisurely routes in Vancouver. So as we share this, we're not going to give you too much information necessarily, but if you have written it, okay, you can type it into the chat and maybe even tell us a favorite coffee shop, or maybe a little destination that you visited on this route. Okay, but this is mostly to give you a sense of how many treasures there are in the region. Okay, not just in Vancouver proper, but lots of different places in the region. So specifically, we'll start with Pitt Meadows and Maple Ridge. Lots of amazing trails. Okay, in Pitt Meadows and Maple Ridge, these are a couple photos of the Pitt Meadows dike trail system now, and also very flat, just so that you know this is really good and leisurely for a family ride. A lot of these rides we also discovered on letsgobiking.net. It's a brilliant resource for family leisure route planning purposes. If you haven't heard of it, I highly recommend that you look that up. Okay, so here's the Cranberry Trail, for example, especially in November. If you, October, November on a dry day, you can do this trail and you can see the lush cranberry fields. The image you see within the picture is a kid-friendly route, meaning that they reduce the length, obviously, and considering the terrain being fairly flat for children and beginner riders. This one is super fun. I rode it this summer, Better River Trails. Oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. You can ride it with maybe road bikes, not so much, but any kind of commuter bike will do. Okay, and again, really flat, lots of different places to stop and pop into the river on a hot day. This is, I'm almost reluctant to tell you because I want to reserve it for myself, but it is absolutely amazing. Okay, so this is something to try out. If you do a detour, there is a great blue heron reserve just off of what you see number 2 there. Okay, and that's also a nice little pit stop for you to make. The Fort to Fort Trail in Langley, I've walked parts of it. I haven't really biked it before, but what's great about this, of course, you can start from Fort Langley, you know, the little historic village there, lots of snacks and such that you can take with you, or maybe even if this is the end point for you, have a nice little lunch, right? And you go through really nice, this is an orchard, I believe, that you ride through. A little bit up and down, but not too bad, fairly flat, I would say. Okay. The next couple are not as flat, but they're very accessible by transit, which is why we wanted to include them. Belcarra Sassmont Lake in Port Moody. Okay, Port Moody also has lots of wonderful breweries for those of you who are into beer. This one you can access through the inlet SkyTrain station. You can see at the bottom right there, and a little bit of a ride, I would say, some hills definitely, so you want to make sure that you're up for that, but definitely worth it. The next one you can access through Lafarge Douglas Lake, and that's the last station, I believe, on the Evergreen line, and you can see that quick short ride away you can get to the Fraser River. Again, a really lovely, fairly, I mean, parts of it is not as flat, but fairly flat along the Poco Trail by the river. Sorry that this image is a little blurry, but this is a Seymour demonstration forest. For those of you who have ridden it, you know that this is actually fairly accessible for beginner riders as well. There's a misconception of this being only for roadies, you know, people with road bikes, not so. You can have a commuter bike, and especially if you take the red route that's pictured here, the Seymour Valley Trailway. Has some rolling hills, but with some gear changes, so you can definitely, it's very enjoyable, I would say. Okay, so something worth visiting. You saw an image of the Spirit Trail earlier. This one is a pretty comprehensive trail system, collaboration with the Squamish Nation and all of the 3 municipalities on the North Shore. Connects lots of different things, lots of different terrains and shopping districts as well. So you can download the map, obviously, as well. Okay, good signage. In Richmond, this one is a good one. Iona Beach, you can either, if you have bike racks on your vehicle, you can take it over, and there is a 10K jetty right at Iona that kids love to ride down along on. But even biking to Iona, it's fairly accessible, I would say. Ferguson Road, as you see in this big image here, is flat, not too many vehicles. I know that these days maybe there's more vehicles than before, but with some certain attention that you're paying to the road, it should be fairly safe. On the right side, these two are pictures from the West Dyke Middle Arm Dyke Trail that takes you from the Canada Line Bridge all the way to Steveston. Okay, so again, pretty flat. There's a Terra Nova park that is kind of halfway in between. That is great for families and for kids to take a pit stop at. Okay, so lots more. Know that Let's Go Biking. These are all on there. It's downloadable maps as well, so you can definitely take them to go with you. Okay, here's a Boundary Bay Trail in Delta. There is a South Surrey Trails in Surrey that encompasses Crescent Beach. Again, lots of these good things that the folks at Let's Go Biking has done a great job in crowdsourcing. Just last but not least, wanting to tell you a little bit about this hidden secret that is Barnston Island. Okay, so this is a little Barnston Island you can actually access through a little ferry. Okay, and you can take your bikes. And once you get there, you can literally do a whole round around the island, the Barnston Island, on a bike. Beautiful wide roads. I believe that one of our committees, Surrey Maple Ridge Committee, is doing this with the community sometime in August. So that's if you live around there, you can certainly look up Hub's events and maybe even be able to join them on this. This is the two most well-known bikeway systems, the BC Parkway and Central Valley Greenway. Good maps all around, right? Connecting New West Burnaby and Vancouver. Know that there's SkyTrain stations that are sort of on or around both of these routes, you know, going into New West and coming back into Vancouver. So you can definitely combine multimodal transportation with this. Last but not least, Seaside Greenway, all ages and abilities. And if you have a City of Vancouver bike map, you will see that it is highlighted in yellow color. And for other municipalities, pay attention to, most of them now are paying attention to highlighting all ages and ability routes. So pay attention to them on the map. Arbutus Greenway, as I mentioned before, right, now separating pedestrians with cyclists, and that is the new best practice, just to make sure that in terms of speed, there's less risk of collisions. At the very end of Arbutus Greenway, right on the Fraser River, there is another hidden gem called the Milltown Pub, some really nice outdoor spaces. Ooh, a little field trip, maybe for the month of August or September. Okay, so again, I know I'm going super fast because I wanted to cover the rest of the materials. Odessa, I'm just going to pause here. Is there anything that is urgent question-wise?
I don't think urgent. Okay. I've been responding to them. And yeah, if we have time at the end, there's one I'd like to ask you.
Okay, great. So I will continue on just for another 5 minutes to talk a little bit about route planning, apps, maps, and tools. Okay, so just because of time, I won't do this little poll, but you can see, I mean, there are a ton of different planning tools and apps now that's available to folks. For those of you who are doing mountain biking, for example, Trailforks is a really great app. For other folks, for example, you know, who are doing a lot of road riding, Strava, Ghost Racer, right? There's a lot of those kind of specific types of riding apps for route planning. But I think for most of you, Google Maps is probably still, Google Maps as well as myself, my favorite is paper maps actually, are still some of the most accessible tools for us. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of these apps and give you some ideas as to what considerations you may, that may be relevant for you, okay? So paper maps, the comparison between paper maps and Google Maps, we often recommend that you combine the two, okay? So that you use them in tandem. The reason why is because even for Google Maps, I think they're great, okay? But know that the caveat here is that number one, they don't update regularly. Number two, when you use that bike function, which now they have, which is a great function, sadly, for a lot of routes that they suggest, it is the shortest route, which means that they're going to plan a lot of major street routes for you. So combining Google Maps with paper maps that actually shows you where are the AAA, all ages and ability routes highlighted in, right, yellow. You can see this is the screen grab of the City of Vancouver's map. And also that are residential street bike lanes, right? That's highlighted in yellow here, or sorry, rather in green lines here. So combining the two is probably the best way to go. What I also do like about paper maps is that there are these great legends, right, on the side, meaning it explains, gives you a reminder of rules of the road, what each of the markings, ground markings, street markings, signs actually mean. So that's a really nice reminder for you as well. Okay. Google Maps, you can see the elevation especially if you click on the terrain function, right? The top topography a little bit. Just know that, if they're concerned about hills, obviously that's something just to give you an idea. Talked a lot about Let's Go Biking already. You know that some of the screen grabs from previous slides, that's all from Let's Go Biking. Great resource. It's a website, has downloadable maps for free, also has a couple books. So Colleen has really done a great job of culminating a lot of these, again, these are probably routes that folks, cyclist communities have crowdsourced and gathered. So yeah, definitely take a look at them and download the maps that are relevant to you, and perhaps even get, I believe there are two books, one on for the region and the other one is for the Okanagan. Okay, so that's something to think about. Two quick things, not going to talk much about this. Know that cyclinginvancouver.ca is a website that you can use in combination with Google Maps and paper maps. Okay, so the good thing about this is that it maps out all of the public washrooms, Moby bike docks, water fountains, right? Especially for those who are concerned about en route facilities. This is a really good little tool for seeing where all of these things are. Next is the Vancouver Bike Route Planner. This is based off of the research. This is actually a little web-based tool that's based off of the research that came out of Cycling in Cities. So you can see that you can plan routes by their different types: shortest, least total elevation gain, least steep hills, most vegetated even, right? And it also, you can also check the safer bike routes box, which means that it will somehow plan a route that includes more of the AAA routes. Okay. Last but not least, for folks who are perhaps not, who are traveling around or who are based in different places in Canada, this is a Canada-wide app that is free called Cowlines. And this is an app that helps with multimodal route planning, meaning that you can select a bunch of different modes that you want to combine, and it's going to plan a route that is, based off of like time, how much time you have. Maybe you want to spend the least amount of money on this trip, so cost, or greenhouse emissions, CO2, right? Okay, so try this out. I'm not sure if it's everybody's cup of tea, but try this out. It certainly can be really helpful for multimodal transportation. Okay, so with that said, multimodal transportation, just a couple of last slides before we go into Q&A. Know that there are tons of different resources on TransLink's website, right? We've got different things like bus bike racks, and you can definitely take bikes on the SkyTrain. And there are safe bike locking mechanisms now in place at SkyTrain stations in the shape of bike parquets, as well as bike lockers. Not going to talk about this too much. So just know that, yes, you can take your bike on transit. Most of them, pretty much most of the time, right? So rush hour on the Expo Millennium lines are really the only restrictions here, okay? For those of you who have e-bikes or who are considering buying an e-bike, know that this is good news. Last year, this is a new legislation. E-bikes are now allowed on buses. Okay, except that, of course, it has to weigh less than 55 pounds. The wheels have to fit in the bike rack. So all of this said, obviously, it would be a really good idea for you to test it out beforehand before you do it in real time. So to do that, there are 5 different demo stations. Again, apologies if this slide is not updated quite thoroughly here. So number one, if you want to learn how to put your bus or bike on the bus, there are videos on TransLink. If you just Google it, not on TransLink, but just Google it on YouTube, you should be able to find a couple, watch it, right? Take a look at how it's done. And I would say many people get better at things by doing. So if you live close to either one of the 5 demo stations, there's one at Main Street Science World, one at City Hall in Vancouver, one at City of North Vancouver, City Hall Plaza, and a couple in Coquitlam and Port Moody, and I can't remember where they are, but we are going to send you a follow-up email with links, and that's going to be included in there. So hopefully you'll be able to, you can even do a quick Google search as well. You should be able to find these 5 demo stations. Try it out. If you don't live close to any of these demo stations, what you can do is to roll your bike over to just a bus depot close to you. Ask the bus driver when they're on a break. They're usually pretty gracious. They want you to do it right when you're doing it in real time. Just ask them if you can try, okay? All right, I am, apologies that I was rushing through all of this, just wanting to make sure we get through all of the materials. For those of you who have to leave, thank you so much for taking the time with us, but I am here for a bit more time just to take folks' questions, if there are any.
So there was one question that I provided my own sort of anecdotal personal experience with, but you might have something to add, which was about if there's anything that can be added to pathways or built in to slow down cyclists and skateboarders and other users. Do you have any thoughts on that, or is there any research you're aware of?
Yeah, it's a good question. I know that this is probably something that you can find on the Hub Ungap the Map campaign page, where there is kind of a handbook of best practices infrastructure. If it's not on the website, feel free to email Hub directly. They will be able to send you a copy, I believe, because this is an ongoing project, I believe, in terms of informing also policy. So that's something that is a resource. Otherwise, I know that a lot of research also focuses on what is not working. So that's a good question that you're asking about what is working. So I think that the best resource is that infrastructure, bike infrastructure best practice.
Thanks. If anybody else has a question that perhaps I answered, but they want more on it, they can feel free to us, either unmuting themselves or putting it back in.
Great. And I see that and it's great to see that the folks are perhaps logging on from different places, on the East Coast as well, and Toronto. Unfortunately, this is fairly kind of BC or Metro Vancouver specific. But if you are looking for bike trails around Toronto, I would say get in touch with the Toronto Bike Advocacy organization. They're actually doing some really good work there, and they may be able to provide you with some information as well. And let's see if there's anything else here. Yeah, so similar resources website to Caroline's for the US. Yeah, not that I know of. I apologize. Yeah, I wonder if there's anybody maybe in our virtual room space here that may have some tips or maybe resources to share, but not that anything that I'm aware of. Apologies. What's your favorite Shortish afternoon ride? Good question. So it really depends on, so is this a leisure, I'm just gonna clarify as a, is this a leisurely ride that you're looking for? Or is it, yeah, okay, great. So I would say, to be honest, I really enjoy riding to Olympic Village, and from there, even going, with the seawall to Granville Island, for example. slow riding to Granville Island. And then from there going over to Kitts Beach. So all of this, of course, it's all connected. I'd say that leisurely rides, I enjoy being by the water quite a bit. So that's something that you can do from Olympic Village. The other way around the seawall would be to go through kind of Roundhouse, Yaletown. So you can also follow there, and it gets you straight over to English Bay. I would say it really depends on where you live, right? I think I live somewhere close to Cedar Cottage, so close, and this is kind of close to Fraser Broadway area. So a really nice ride for me sometimes is actually to Woodland Park, and this is like all the way, you know, from down to on Mosaic Bikeway and pass by. I mean, this is kind of East Van. Woodland Park is right on the Advocacy bike route, and right by it there are some really lovely food trucks, and there are a couple of breweries as well, and it's a really lovely, usually quietish park that I can gather with a couple folks, and it's always a good time. Any other questions? Okay, we're hoping that this webinar is really helpful for getting you started in thinking about route planning and safety specifically, right? And if you, especially for those of you who are wanting to review maybe some rules of the road, like, you know, how do I ride with other vehicles? Where, lane positioning, where should I be placing my bike on different types of streets? We do have a couple of online courses that are fairly accessible that you can just sign up and do. One is called Streetwise Cycling, and this is more tailored toward adults and, you know, adult learners. And there's another one, Learn to Ride Online. This is more tailored towards the 9 to 12 kind of school-aged kids, even though the content is applicable to also adults as well. So if you want to do that even with your kids, right, or the younger folks in your family, really helpful resources there. And these are links that we hopefully will also include in the follow-up email that we send you after this workshop. So keep an eye out for that. If you are a Hub member, thank you so much for your ongoing support, you know, to making cycling better in Metro Vancouver. We can't do this without our members. Our members also have lots of exclusive, of course, discounts and benefits to bike shops, right? Bike repairs, also free minutes for car sharing and bike sharing with rather car sharing and bike sharing companies as well. So if you are curious, you can log on to our website and look at our member both benefits and what members do in supporting this work as well if you wanted to contribute. So as I mentioned, there will be a follow-up email, and not only will there be some additional resources, there will also be a little feedback survey in there that probably will take a minute to complete. We would really appreciate you giving us some feedback, what worked well, what perhaps if there's any new content that you want to see in future workshops as well. Right, so that's going to be really helpful for us. Otherwise, feel free if after this workshop there are questions that you have, feel free to email Hub directly with the email that you receive that follow-up email through, right? And we'll be able to answer your questions directly. So thank you all so much. Our apologies that it is 8 minutes now over time. Thank you for staying and sticking this out with us. I'm going to stop sharing here. And we hope to see you on the bike paths and bike lanes in the region, and maybe another webinar down the road. Okay, so take good care, and we'll see you again. Thank you.